Welcome back, fans of the Madmen, to Week 4 of DPL Season 8. Madmen come off the mid-season week with new and updated drafts across each of the tiers, and they are ready to take on Trick of Eye, who currently sits in the top 4 of the standings, which is a playoff position. I want to apologize for this delayed video. I had a lot of IRL events and school stuff come up recently. I still have it going on. I'm just making time for this out of obligation to the team. So I'm opting to make this a little bit of a shorter recap this time, focusing primarily on kind of just the top 3 games, or my top 3 favorite games from this week, from a competitive and entertainment point. So why don't we just hop right into recap. Alright, just to highlight some of the other games I'm not going to be showing. Lucas lost game 1 to TJ, who sort of clinched that game with an assist from an Ice Beam Freeze, but I felt like Lucas knows he could have played a little bit better positioning wise, but any chance of winning that game was taken once the Raging Bolt got frozen. So the Madmen are down 0-1 going into this game, game 2, Bacon versus J-Scurf. This is J-Scurf's debut in the DPL. He got picked up here in the mids by Trick of Eye, and he is playing for the first time this season. So J-Scurf's Terra captains are Stellar Enamorous and Terra Poison Venusaur, while Bacon's captains are Bacon's captain is Terrafire Latias. As you can see, this team is slightly different. Dragalge is no longer on the team. There is a Hisuian Quillfish, and instead of Terra Thundurus, it was replaced with a Terra Latias. So why don't we just hop right into the game. So off the bat, J-Scurf kind of decides to handicap himself a little bit by effectively sacking his Ting Lu to Great Tusk off this lead. He takes 2 close combats, obviously EV to live 2, but basically the only ways to kind of handle the Latias or even the Mismagius are gone. As there's no real resist to kind of that stab combo. And so after some sequences with Roaring Moon, kind of nets in a spike up from Bacon's side by the Quillfish, and then Latias comes in and easily pivots on this Ninetales and is able to get secure damage on it. Even with the sun up, this Roaring Moon isn't going to be doing a whole lot to Tinkaton unless it hard predicts with EQ, but it could be Shukaberry's Tinkaton to also cover the Venusaur, who opts to go for Sludge Bomb expecting the Latias to come in. Bacon decides to take advantage of that turn, go for T-Wave. Venusaur obviously had Lumberry, so it does save it in that regard. No need to rely on Healing Wish Ninetales at that point in time, but he decides to go for Healing Wish anyways, and he puts it up in the air, meaning the next spawn he goes into that has chip damage will be healed back to full minus rocks. But Enamorous comes in. Bacon wisely is going to scout the Stellar Terra here, which it ends up being, and not the Venusaur. But then he kind of awkwardly sacks off Venusaur to a very obvious Scarf Meowscarada's triple axle by swapping on Enamorous. I thought maybe he might have gone Blastoise on that turn because the ice move was very obvious, and he would have actually preserved Healing Wish still, and he could have Healing Wished anything else after the Blastoise opted to switch out or died. But yeah, as you can see, the Blastoise goes for Shell Smash. Mismagius has a Mirror Herb, and even with Endure Salic Berry from the Blastoise, it's still not enough to outspeed the Mismagius at +3. So Bacon basically just sweeps from here, and there's nothing that J-Scurf can... I thought maybe with Shell Smash Endure, maybe they might have been like a Torrent Aqua Jet set, but they weren't Lychee Berry, they were Shellac, so I'm like, okay, so they're definitely trying to outspeed something that might be Mirror Herb or something, but I guess they got the speed creep wrong. I think they were probably only creeping for Scarf Meowscarada and not +2 Latias or Mismagius, clearly. Bit interesting. But yeah, Bacon basically cleans up the game, and this was a pretty clinical game overall from Bacon. But yeah, why don't we just move on to the next game? So why don't we recap the games leading up to the one that you see on your screen. Game 3 is my pick for Wheelchair of the season, and probably nothing will surpass it. Very ugly game, I'm not going to show it, but it's an absolute disaster clash by my pal Bird, unfortunately, who kind of just got slapped around by Shadow. So the Madmen fall to 1-2 in the series. But going into Game 4, Sky Penguin debuts the new Usum Yard Sand team that the Madmen decided to craft during the mids, and he pulls out a dub against Captain II and evens the series at 2 apiece. And then a Game 5 might have happened. It was pretty irrelevant, and I heard there was kind of a robbery over there or something. Regardless, Madmen are up now 3-2, and that leads us into game number 6, which is the one you see on the screen, Habita versus Mount Tay. So why don't we just hop right into that game? Hob has to scout this lead Mew in a safe manner and takes helmet damage on the Darm as it gets up rocks, which is pretty big. Hob decides to go for a taunt as he loses his item with Zera, and it takes 2 hits to take out the Mew. And the Zera is now extremely weak. It's pretty low. Even Coco should be able to take that out with the beam later on. He decides to go into a very Spadef Landorus Eye on the, looks like a Scarf Blacephalon, definitely not Specs. And it gets a double Spadef drop, one on the Landorus, forcing the switch out to Persian to take more chip, which is pretty bad because Habita was going to be using that most likely probably for the Crawdaunt that you can see across the screen. Fortunately, he bluffs the Scarf there as Malte scouts it. And this kind of gets him momentum back, and he gets up rocks, which is pretty big. But then Hob does some like maneuvering around this Dragonite to kind of scout what the item is. And it looks like it potentially might be Choice Banded. And he ends up sacking the Persian to get more chip on it. And this Corviknight, interesting enough, is a red card. And so it decides to get up a Tailwind, which is pretty scary if he's able to get Crawdaunt, but Hob is just going to be able to maneuver around and pivot with his U-turn mons between Lando and Scizor. And there isn't a whole lot Mountain's going to be able to do as he U-turns here and brings Scizor back in, and it's going to be able to knock out the Dragonite with a Banded Bullet Punch. Now, this Blacephalon is not going to be in range of Bullet Punch as it needs to be below 76%. So basically another set of rocks will put it in range of Bullet Punch. But he opts to stay in versus Slowking, which to me screamed the most obvious Kasib berry of all time. He decides to sack it. I think it would have been really wise to save it, potentially go Core or Coco. And then he brings in Crawdaunt versus the Slowking. And I thought for sure it was going to be clicking Swords Dance, and it would have just won the game with Aqua Jet. But instead, it decides to just kill the Slowking. I guess he didn't want to risk a burn, but the Tailwind does get up eventually. Crawdaunt comes in. Hob decides to sack the Scizor to stall the Tailwind turns. Again, another turn that Mount potentially could have used to basically get up an SD. But as you can see, Scarf EQ from G-Darm is going to be able to clean up this game. And there was another point earlier in the game where Scizor comes in versus Crawdaunt after Slowking goes down, and he basically forces the Crawdaunt to switch, and in doing so, Hob makes that incredible read and goes for Defog and ensures that rocks are off the field. That way his G-Darm can be out of range of Aqua Jet, because had it taken the rocks, as you can see here, it lived on 12%, rocks did 25%. The Crawdaunt would have just cleaned with Aqua Jet. Probably didn't expect the Defog there from the Scizor, and ultimately that won the game for Hob. Very close nail biter, but again, Crawdaunt not being SD and not risking it versus the Slowking was a bit interesting, but as a Madmen fan, I take those. So this puts the Madmen up 4-2 in the series with 2 more games left to close this week out and try and secure the 2 points. But so far, they've secured 1 point and the potential tie, worst case scenario. But after time in week number 3, Madmen definitely want to try and get as many points as they can and not fumble it. So why don't we head into the final game that I'm going to be covering. All right, with the Madmen leading 4-2 going into game number 7 with a chance to clinch the series, Rye ended up looking like Riley Reid out there getting his ass clapped by Sablo. So as a result, the Madmen are now up 4-3 with one final game left to decide whether or not they get 2 points or they have to settle with just the 1 point. So game 8, we have Joshua versus Skyhorse. But yeah, Sky's Terra Captains are Terra Electric Sneasler and Terra Steel Delphox, as you can see across the screen. And then Josh's Terra Captains are Terra Electric Tornadus Therian and Terra Poison Carbine. So yeah, why don't we head right into the game. So Joshua kind of stays in turn 1 versus a lead booster Shocks, which I did tell Joshua that this exact set was brought versus this team in a previous week, or maybe the other Torn team. As a result, he decides to stand. It's very bulky. I guess it's EV to live in Earth Power. Gets off crucial damage and then exchanges it with Rotom. And then this Rotom has an absolute masterclass overtime performance here. Completely 1v1s this Terapagos with Light Screen, Pain Split, and Hydro Pump. And yeah, as you'll see, that it'll also end up clicking Volt Switch here. And this Terapagos is easily revengeable now, as he decides to go Treads with the Light Screen up. Pitiful damage from the Terapagos as he's able to spin, remove the rocks, and take out the Terapagos. So this is a great start for Joshua. He ends up trading this Treads here to remove the Basculegion item and get chip damage, while the Basculegion goes for Wave Crash. And yeah, this Torn is going to be able to knock it out. But then Delphox kind of reveals Scarf, or the Torn is just insanely slow with its bulk. But Delphox outspeeds and clicks Psychic as the Torn clicks Plot. Pretty greedy click from Joshua, I felt, but I mean, he's still in a pretty commanding position. He decides to swap into this very Spadef Slowking, and there's obviously only one switch in to this Mon, which is the Tinkaton, so he goes for Flamethrower on the Tinkaton, removing potential Ockaberry or whatever item. In this case, it was Balloon, and Torn is able to come in on the Tinkaton and remove it, and then Sneasler ends up clicking Normal Gem Fake Out, which basically reveals its item, activating its Unburden. Joshua, with the clutch sturdy red card Carbink, is able to force out the Sneasler to a non-threatening position, and then sets up a Trick Room in the process, exploding, and then setting up the back's endgame to basically clean up the game. And just like that, the Madmen win the series 5-3. Not a very clean series, a lot of uncompetitive games in here as well, but regardless, the Madmen are able to win the week, get the 2 points, and move up in the standings. So after that devastating tie, week 3 against Made in Heaven, the Madmen recollect themselves during the mids. They come out swinging with a massive dub this week. Now, despite the win, I do not think the Madmen players played particularly well or prepared that well collectively. There were a lot of ill-prepared games, and I felt like there were also some just not well-played games. I mean, it was a bit of a shit show in some cases, but you know, despite all of that, despite all of the odds, even some unlucky games, I'm still proud that they're now able to sit at 5 total points after securing that W, and they're now 3rd place in the standings, just behind Wigglytuff's Guild and Band Chasers, who happens to be their Week 5 opponent. So, they control their destiny, playing the 2 teams in front of them currently, Wigglytuff's Guild, Band Chasers, and I believe Porygon Squad as well, who is currently below them. So this leaves the door open to cementing a playoff berth early if they're able to secure wins against Band and Wigglytuff Guild, because they'll jump both of those teams. And I believe even getting to 8 points is enough for a playoff berth. But if they get 2 wins regardless, that'll be 9 points, and that should be easily enough to make the playoffs. But yeah, they just need to buckle down and get the job done. I'm very proud of the people. I'm especially want to shout out Joshua. I think he had the cleanest game. I think Hobbs' game was pretty clean too, but I felt like Mountay kind of, if he had SD on Crawdon, I think he had to go for that. I think that gave him the best chance to win, but again, he didn't expect Defog, so that's a very difficult thing to expect on a Bandit Scizor in that position. But I want to also shout out Joshua. I think he played a phenomenal game, executed his game plan very well, and he's 3-0 on the season, and he's dominated every game that he's played so far this season, and I'm very proud of him. Definitely one of my favorite Madmen performances of the season so far. Absolutely clutch. But yeah, as a quick aside, I request a formal apology from Blitz for his inexcusable actions that you see on this screen. And until he does, his games will continue to not get any coverage or any mention from me, the #1 Madmen fan. Just putting it out there. So as always, thank you all for watching, and I will see you for next week's recap. Peace.